It was a cold November night in London, and the roundhouse was packed beyond capacity. The lights slowly dimmed, and a murmur of anticipation filled the crowd. Amy Winehouse was about to take the stage for what would be considered one of the most intimate and revealing shows of her career. No one knew that this performance would reveal a completely unknown side of the singer who conquered the world with her unique voice and unmistakable style. Amy stood backstage, her hands trembling slightly, not from the usual pre-show jitters, but from something else. She had made a decision that could completely change the public's perception of her. For weeks, she had been planning this special moment, writing letters to important people in her life, preparing speeches she had never shared publicly. Her heart pounded as she adjusted the vintage dress she had chosen especially for this evening, a navy blue gown that had belonged to her grandmother, a woman who had always been her greatest inspiration. The fabric carried not only memories, but also the strength of generations of women who faced their own battles with dignity and courage. When Amy finally stepped onto the stage, something was different. Instead of the relaxed, slightly rebellious demeanor everyone knew, she walked with an almost solemn elegance. Her hair was tied back in a simple bun, sans the famous beehive, and she wore subtle makeup, a completely new version of herself. The audience was silent for a few seconds, trying to process the visual transformation of the artist they loved. "Good evening, London," she said into the microphone, her voice clearer and more controlled than in previous performances. "Tonight will not be like any other. Tonight, I want you to meet Amy Jade Winehouse, not the character you see in magazines, not the woman of scandal, but the daughter, the granddaughter, the friend, and the dreamer behind it all." The audience remained completely silent, sensing the gravity of the moment. Some fans in the front row began to get emotional, realizing they were about to witness something extraordinary. The cameras recording the show captured every nuance of her expression, every subtle movement that demonstrated a vulnerability rarely seen. It was as if an invisible wall had been torn down between the artist and her audience. Amy walked to the piano in the center of the stage and sat down carefully. Her hands found the keys with a comforting familiarity, and she began to play a soft, melancholy melody no one had ever heard before. "This song," she began, her voice intertwined with the piano notes, "was written one night when I almost gave up on everything. I was alone in my apartment, looking at photos of my family, and I realized I had become a stranger to the people I loved most. The song that followed was raw, honest, and deeply personal. It spoke of the moments of loneliness no one saw, of the nights she called her mother crying, of the constant fear of disappointing the people who believed in her. There were no instruments other than the piano, no backing vocals, just Amy and her soul pouring out through the music. The words flowed like tears, filled with genuine pain, but also with a shy hope. "I've learned that being vulnerable isn't being weak," she said between verses. "I've learned that showing who we truly are is the bravest thing we can do." Tears began streaming down the faces of many in the audience. Some nearby fans reached out toward the stage as if to hug the artist and comfort her. The energy in the room had completely shifted. It was no longer a typical concert, but rather a moment of deep and genuine human connection. After finishing the first song, Amy got up from the piano and walked to the center of the stage. She grabbed a stool and sat down, creating an even more intimate atmosphere. "You know," she began with a soft smile, "I didn't always want to be a singer. As a child, I dreamed of being a teacher. I had a little chalkboard in my room and would pretend to teach my stuffed animals." The audience laughed softly, touched by the image of little Amy playing teacher. "My grandmother Cynthia used to listen to me sing as I taught the bears, and she always said, 'Amy, my girl, your voice will touch hearts one day.' I didn't understand what she meant then, but now I understand." Amy then shared a series of childhood memories that painted a completely different portrait of the woman the audience knew. She spoke of afternoons spent in her grandmother's garden, learning to cook family recipes, and of nights when her mother would help her with her homework while humming jazz melodies. She described how she discovered her passion for music gradually, not through a single epiphany, but through small experiences that accumulated over the years. "The first time I felt like music was truly a part of me," she continued, "was when my grandfather passed away. I was 12 and couldn't stop crying. My mom told me to try to sing the feelings, and I did. Music became my way of processing the world, my emotional language. The vulnerability in her voice was palpable, and many in the audience began to see Amy not as a distant celebrity, but as a real person with universally human experiences." The mood at the Roundhouse grew more tense as Amy decided to address the more difficult aspects of her life. She rose from her stool and walked slowly across the stage, her hands gesturing gently as she searched for the right words. "You read about my life in the newspapers. You see photos taken at my lowest points. And I know I often seem like just another celebrity who can't handle fame. But the truth is much more complex than that." Her voice began to tremble slightly, but she took a deep breath and continued. "From a very young age, I felt an ache in my chest that I couldn't explain. It was like there was a hole inside me that I tried to fill in every way possible. With music, with love, with substances, with anything that would make me feel complete, even if only for a few minutes." The silence in the audience was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop. "I'm not here to make excuses for my mistakes," she clarified, her voice gaining strength. "I hurt people I love, I disappointed fans who believed in me, and most of all, I hurt myself in ways you can't even imagine. But I'm here because I've learned something important. Healing doesn't come from hiding our wounds, but from having the courage to look at them and ask for help." Some in the audience began to cry, openly recognizing their own struggles in Amy's honest words. She had transformed the stage into a safe space where vulnerability was not only accepted, but celebrated. Amy returned to the piano, but this time her posture was different, more erect, more confident. She began to play a lighter, more hopeful melody. "You're probably expecting me to talk about romantic relationships now," she said with a genuine smile. "But the love that truly saved me didn't come from a boyfriend or a husband. It came from unexpected places." She told me about Sarah, a nurse she met during one of her rehab stints. Sarah didn't know who Amy was when she found her crying alone in the hospital hallway at 3 a.m. She just sat next to me and stayed there with me. She didn't say anything. For 20 minutes, just held my hand. When she finally spoke, her words were, "You don't have to be strong all the time. Sometimes the greatest strength is accepting that we need help." Amy also talked about Marcus, a 13-year-old boy she met during a visit to an orphanage. Marcus asked me if I was really Amy Winehouse, and when I confirmed, he said, "Cool, you sing well, but what do you really like to do when you're not singing?" No one had asked me that in years. I didn't even know how to answer because I had forgotten who I was outside of music. The story continued with details about how these chance encounters with ordinary people helped her rediscover parts of herself she had lost. She spoke of learning to cook from an elderly woman she met at a cafe, of long walks in the park with an abandoned dog she decided to adopt. These people taught me that true love doesn't come with conditions or expectations. It just exists, like breathing or the sunrise. Picking up her acoustic guitar, Amy prepared to share another unknown aspect of her journey. "For a long time, music was both my salvation and my prison," she began, carefully tuning the strings. "I felt obligated to always be the Amy you expected, rebellious, intense, dramatic. But what if I just wanted to sing a happy song about making pancakes on Sunday morning?" She laughed, and the audience laughed along, relieved by the momentary, lightness. So I started writing songs I never intended to share with anyone. Songs about small moments of happiness, about the texture of rain on the window, about the smell of coffee in the morning. Amy then played excerpts from some of these, intimate compositions, simple melodies that captured the beauty of everyday moments. "This one," she said before playing a particularly sweet song, "I wrote after spending an entire afternoon watching my neighbor water her plants. It sounds silly, but there was something so peaceful about her daily ritual. I realized I'd forgotten how to find peace in the simple things." The song that followed was completely different from anything on her albums. It was light, hopeful, full of images of growth and renewal. "Music has taught me that I can be many versions of myself," she reflected after finishing her performance. "I can be the woman who sings about pain and loss, but I can also be the one who sings about hope and healing. I don't have to choose just one facet of my humanity." The audience responded with warm applause, many visibly moved by the honesty and transformation they were witnessing. Amy put her guitar aside and walked over to a small table on the side of the stage where an ornate wooden box sat. "I brought something special today," she said, carefully opening the box. "For years, I've written letters to important people in my life, letters I never had the courage to send. Tonight, I want to share some of them with you, because maybe your words will help others going through the same struggles." The first letter was to her mother. Her voice choked with emotion. Amy read, "Dear Mom, I know I've hurt you in ways words can't mend. I know you've stayed up nights worrying about me, cried tears I caused. Felt ashamed when people asked about me, but I need you to know that every sacrifice you made, every loving word, every moment of patience planted a seed of healing in me. I'm trying to grow from those seeds, Mom. I'm trying to become the daughter you deserve." Tears streamed freely down Amy's face, as did many in the audience. She also read a letter to her father, in which she apologized for being so harsh with him during her parents' divorce. There was a letter to Blake, her ex-husband, in which she acknowledged her part in the toxicity of their relationship, but also established healthy boundaries. "And this," she said, holding a letter with special care, "is for the Amy from 5 years ago." Her voice grew firmer as she read, "Amy, I know you're hurting right now. I know it feels like the pain will never go away, that you're lost in a maze with no way out. But I'm here to tell you that you will find your way back home. You will learn to love yourself again. You will discover that you are stronger than you think. And one day you will stand on a stage, holding this letter, surrounded by people who love you just the way you are." Putting the cards back in the box, Amy stood center stage and took a deep breath. You're probably wondering, "Amy, what happened? How did you get here?" And the answer is both simple and complicated. I stopped running away from myself. She walked slowly across the stage, making eye contact with people in the audience. For years, I used my pain as an identity. I thought that if I stopped hurting, I would stop being interesting, I would stop making good music. I was afraid that without the drama, without the chaos, I would just be ordinary. But you know what I discovered? The person I am when I'm healed, when I'm at peace, that person is infinitely more interesting than the broken version of myself. Amy spoke about the gradual healing process, therapy, meditation, reconnecting with family, new hobbies that had nothing to do with music. "I started taking pottery classes," she revealed with a smile. "I, who had always been afraid of silence, learned to love the silence of the potter's wheel. I learned that I can create beauty with my hands even when my voice is resting." She shared how she began to see her fame from a different perspective. "I realized I had a responsibility not only to my music, but to the people who looked up to me, especially the young women who saw in me a reflection of their own struggles. I wanted to be an example that it is possible to find your way back, that healing is worth fighting for, even when it seems impossible." The audience was completely absorbed in every word, many visibly touched by the transformational journey Amy was sharing. It was clear they weren't just hearing about change, they were witnessing a woman who had truly found a healthier, more complete version of herself. To close the evening, Amy took the microphone and stood center stage one last time. The soft lighting highlighted not only her figure, but also the complete transformation in her presence. She radiated a peace and confidence no one had seen before. "You ask me what my future is now," she said, her voice clear and strong. "And I can say with certainty, my future is about building, not tearing down." She then announced her new projects. A foundation to help young artists struggling with addiction, an album celebrating healing rather than wallowing in pain, plans to return to school and perhaps become an art therapist. "I want to use my experience, both pain and healing, to help others find their own paths." Amy also revealed that she was working on a memoir, not focused on the sensationalization of her difficult years, but on her journey of self-discovery and growth. "I want people who are struggling to know that there is hope on the other side of the darkness," she explained. The night ended with Amy singing a completely reimagined version of Stronger Than Me, not as a lament about a lost relationship, but as an anthem of self-discovery and personal empowerment. Her voice had never sounded so clear, so controlled, so full of life. When the lights dimmed and Amy left the stage, the silence lasted nearly a full minute before applause erupted. Many people remained in their seats for a long time afterward, processing what they had witnessed. They hadn't just watched a show, they had been part of a journey of profound human transformation. That night at the Roundhouse would become legendary, not for the scandals or drama many expected from Amy Winehouse, but for the raw courage of a woman who chose to show that healing is possible, that growth is real, and that even from the ashes of self-destruction, a stronger, more genuine version of ourselves can emerge. Amy had proven that her greatest work of art wasn't her music. It was her own transformation.